Welcome to another live episode of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. I am your host, Dr. Maisha Claiborne, psychological safety and communication expert and consultant. Um, One of the things I love is brain behavior and communication, and I am committed to dismantling divisiveness and cultivating connectedness between people so that we can all feel seen, heard, respected, valued, and welcomed. And so that in our families, in our communities, in our organizations, that we can thrive together. So, with that, today's conversation is about distinguishing priority versus importance. Now, why am I talking about this priority versus importance? Well, this is a conversation that has been alive and kicking in the conversations that I've been having inside of organizations, as well as with my one-on-one clients, particularly my executive leadership clients, is how do you prioritize? How do you distinguish what's important? And how do you know how to prioritize all of the things that you have on your plate? And so, oftentimes, when we think of what's important to us, we sometimes collapse that with priority. But it is what I have definitely seen is that there are things that are important and there are things that are a priority. So when you think about things that are important, importance is a indication of value. So things that are important are things that hold value for us, right? But the things that are prioritized tend to be the things that hold urgency with us. So not everything that is important is urgent, and not everything that is urgent is important. And so there is a rubric, a grid that you can begin to look through when uncollapsing priority and importance. And it's also something that you can utilize when you're looking to set certain boundaries for yourself and with other people in your sphere of influence. So let's talk about the four sort of categories here and how you begin to utilize those categories to then prioritize things and put things in their rightful priority in the things that you're trying to get done in your life. So there are those things that are important and urgent, right? So these are the things that hold value, but they also hold a timeline. And these are the things that tend to need to be at the top of the list. All right. And then there are the things that are urgent, but not as important. All right. So these are things that hold a timeline, but they don't tend to hold as much value for you. They're things that you do out of obligation. They're things that usually sometimes related to work. So I will give you an example of something that may be urgent, but that doesn't hold as much importance in the home. That may be putting away laundry after washing it. So sometimes, and I've talked to many moms, and I don't know how many parents can relate to this, but sometimes we wash clothes because that's of urgency and importance because we need clean clothes. But once the clothes are clean and they're folded and they're in the basket and they're available, it's not always as important to get them up in the closet in the drawers as it is as it is to wash them and get them folded. And so it's not as urgent, I should say, to do that. Now, is it important? Yes, it's important for many people because guess what? When you're more organized, when your clothes are organized, it makes it easier to pick out your clothes in the morning, not have to sift through a whole basket. But it doesn't hold urgency because it's not something that if it doesn't get done right now, it's going to greatly disrupt your existence. And so that may be an example of something that is important but doesn't hold urgency. Okay, so these may be also deadlines at work. They may be things that are obligatory. they don't hold as much value for you, but you have to get them done, like emails. Going through emails and responding to emails, or if you're a business owner, um, doing outreach to people to secure your clients, or whatever that might be. It may not hold as much as importance, but it holds some urgency. Okay, now if we move into things that are they're not urgent but they're important, these are things that hold value, but they can wait. There's things that don't need to be done in the right now, but they do hold value for us. There may be things that we enjoy doing. Um, there may be things that we tend to um, sort of inappropriately prioritize because they're important, but they don't have urgency over the things that are urgent and important, or urgent and not as important, right? So then you have this not urgent but important, but then you have the not urgent and the not important categories, and these are the things that we can procrastinate in. These are the things that if because they're not urgent, and they don't hold as much importance, or they don't hold as much value, we tend to procrastinate and put them off until an urgency arises. And so an example of this for me personally is when at the beginning of the year, I am of the awareness that I'm going to need to have to put together my information for taxes, right? And I pay taxes every year. So I know all of the deadlines for business taxes, for corporate taxes, and for personal taxes. And at the beginning of the year, it is one of those things that doesn't hold as much importance and doesn't hold urgency for me. And so what ends up happening is that, we get to around the March deadline, and it begins to rise in urgency, even though it's not something that I hold with the utmost importance, right? There are other things that feel more important. And although, don't get me wrong, paying taxes, filing taxes, I should say, is important enough, but it doesn't hold urgency until it does. And so that's one of those things that it's in the not urgent and not important category until the urgency arises. And so the when we begin to think of our lives and how we create workability in our lives, we can begin to look at what is urgent and what is important to us, and what do we deem as urgent or non-urgent, you know and then that is how we look at what gets the higher priority. Now we also can look at the level of priority, what we say is important to us. We can look at what we say is important to us, and the level to which we prioritize it, because sometimes that is different as well. So oftentimes we have an idea that something should be important to us, or that we think something is important to us, or we think something is a priority, but our actions will actually give us a clue as to whether something is really important to us, because how we prioritize something, which is the urgency with which we give it, will also give us a communication about whether it really is important to us or not. And so when I look at, from an organizational standpoint, I look at um, this thing that I do with psychological safety and trust and communication. And when I speak to leaders about it all the time, they say, "Oh my gosh, this is so needed in our organization. This is so important. This is something that we all need to create psychological safety. We need all to create trust, and because we know that workforce, that people are there's a workforce issue. We know that there's a culture issue, and so I get this a lot as I talk to different leaders and different either healthcare organizations or non-healthcare organizations. I say this is a very important issue. So I'm so glad that you're doing this work. So that's the words of this is important. However, sometimes what I encounter is that while it's important, it doesn't get moved upon because it's not prioritized. So then we have to go and re-examine, well, how important is it really if it's not being prioritized? So maybe it's not of urgency. And is it important or is it not important? There's something to examine in the organization, because when something is important, when it truly is important, then there you begin to put some priority to it, right? You do begin to put priority to it, and you do begin to put and rather than waiting until there's an urgent need, you bring some urgency to it. So again, this is the nuances of priority and importance. So there are things that we say are important, and then there are things that we prioritize. And when we look at this rubric of urgent and important, um, urgent and not important, important but not urgent and not important, this is how we prioritize things, right? We prioritize them based on the urgency and the importance. And so when organizations say to me this is important, it may be important, but it may not be urgent to them. And the way to really create change is, if something is important, you bring the urgency. You have to That urgency has to arise rather than waiting for something bad to happen and having the urge and being in a reactive state because of the urgency. So this is how you bring power. This is how you bring a little bit more power to importance and prioritization. Um, in the household. So I'm gonna flip the script a little bit to the more individual, because I do a lot of executive coaching, a lot of one-on-one coaching around creating workability in one's life, especially as a leader, and when you're wearing multiple hats, how you do that. And so when we think about prioritizing the things in our life, when you have so many things that you're overwhelmed, you have to begin to distinguish what's important and what's urgent, and put them in those categories. So if you look at, if I had this client, and one of the things she said is that she's moving into a higher level of leadership, and she's got all of these things on her list that she's a part of, some that she loves, some that she doesn't love. She has all of these things on her plate at home, and she's concerned about being able to move in the direction that she wants to, from a career standpoint, because she doesn't have one more thing that she can put on her plate. And so one of the first things we did was to have her make a list of all of the things that are on her plate from a work standpoint, and all of the things that are on her plate from a that she's involved with in the community, and then all of the things on her plate um, in her personal household, right? Because as physicians, we tend to, and especially as women physicians, we tend to try to pile it all on. We want to take it all on, right? We have this sort of lone ranger, or it's all on me type of attitude. And so we started with the work schedule, or the work, and we looked at what are the things that you're involved with at work that are urgent and important, that are non-urgent and non-important, that are non-urgent and important, that are urgent and not important, and not urgent and not important. So what are the things that I had her categorize, these things that she had to do on her list. And then there's another set of categories we looked at: fulfilling and important, uh, not fulfilling but important, not fulfilling, important but not fulfilling, um, fulfilling but not important, not fulfilling, not important. So we used a similar rubric to categorize some of the things in her that she's a part of, that are extracurricular, that she's not necessarily getting paid to do, boards that she's sitting on, committees that she's sitting on, And we put all of these in categories. And so then we looked at what is it that can be taken off her plate? What is it that can be modified? What is it that needs to be prioritized? And in that way, we can begin to create workability in her life as a um, as she moves towards her leadership and her career goals. So that's like a real life example of a person that of a leader that I'm coaching right now, in which we're making progress because she's recognizing the things that are not so important. She's recognizing the things that are not so fulfilling, and we're beginning to siphon some of those things off the plate. Conversely, we're reigniting her interest in the things that perhaps were feeling overwhelming, but now that she's pulling things off of the plate that are not as important and not urgent, she can actually focus on and see the value of the things that she maybe previously thought wasn't important, and bring some urgency and bring some importance to that and bring some attention to that. So that's the way it shows up in the individual. So this is a again, this is sort of a rubric you can use to begin to look at, number one, what are you saying is important that is not, that you're not congruently prioritizing, right? So that's one thing. What are you saying that's important that you're not congruently prioritizing? And then reassessing, is it really important? And if it is, how can you bring some urgency to that, um, in sort of a preventive manner? What are some things that you are deeming urgent and important that maybe are not as urgent and important as you thought? Maybe the timeline of it could be stretched out, right? Um, where is there a sense of urgency that is happening purely and that is needing to that has become important purely because of procrastination, purely because um, of reactive, like that are purely reactive urgency, rather than bringing a level of urgency, um, like from an empowering context, like, okay, this is important, and so we're going to prioritize this with urgency. So where is there a reactive urgency? Where is there an urgency purely due to procrastination, or due to ignoring the cracks in the foundation, and so those cracks get bigger until you have a bigger problem? So that you can look at it that way, and begin to put these things in perspective and reevaluate, so that you can actually be preventive in achieving the culture or the workability in your life or in your organization that you are moving towards. All right. So this is really what I wanted to bring today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about priority and importance, and distinguishing the two, and how you have personally collapsed or uncollapsed the two, and what reevaluation are you now doing now that you've sort of heard this distinction? What reevaluation are you now doing? What actions will you now take? What actions have you seen that you have not taken that you could now take, based on reevaluating this relationship to importance and priority, and to urgency and importance as well? All right. Would love to hear your thoughts about that, and share this episode, because I think that there are a lot of people, leaders, organizations, individuals, business owners, who collapse this idea of priority and importance, or who have it undistinguished. And when it's undistinguished, then it can create overwhelm, or it can create a misdirected prioritization of things, or a lack of prioritization and a reactive urgency. So share this with a friend, a colleague, a family member. Again, if you want to hear past episodes of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors, you can find it on your favorite podcast platform. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now YouTube podcasts. So you can listen via those and subscribe to the podcast that way. And if you are interested in bringing this conversation into, or any conversation around cultivating trust, safety in your organization, please reach out to me. You can reach out to me directly on the platform of which you're listening, or you can reach out to me by email, Dr. Maisha at drmaisha.com. Alternatively, you can go to this website here and learn a little bit more about the consulting, the coaching, and the trainings that I offer. Speaking of that, I would love to share with you something exciting that's going on coming up on September 12th at the time of this recording. So if you're listening to this live, this is coming up. If you're listening to this on replay, sorry, you might have missed it. But if you're listening to this live, I am going to be doing a program for healthcare. So if you're a healthcare leader, this is for you. I'm going to be doing a program called Psychological Safety and Overlooked Imperative for a thriving culture and workplace in healthcare. So that's September the 12th. You'll see me posting online about it. It's in collaboration with the Maryland Healthcare Education Institute. And so I will be posting that link so that if you are, like, if you're a physician, if you're a healthcare leader, if you're a healthcare professional, and this is a conversation that you feel like is important, you can, number one, register, or you can, number two, pass this on to your leadership, and you can do group registrations through the MHEI, the Maryland Healthcare Education Institute. Similarly, in late October, if your organization has employee resource groups and you're an employee resource group leader, I am going to be keynoting at the Global ERG Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'll be posting more about that coming up, but have some exciting engagements coming up, workshops that I'll be doing in the area. So stay tuned for that. And finally, I have just completed my psychological safety and assessment scoring tool. So if you are wondering, how are we doing in the area of psychological safety and trust in the organization, you can take this assessment. It will score you and it will give you some recommendations. And so I'll make sure that link is also in the show notes and here on the platform as well. And finally, stay tuned, because I also have an effective communication assessment tool that is in the works that will be launching at the end of this month, September. So stay tuned on that as well. So I am creating an entire organizational culture assessment toolkit, and that's been in the works for a while. So we're now in the final stages of creating the communication assessment toolkit, and then we'll have an effective and inclusive listening assessment tool as well. So with that, I will leave you with, what are you prioritizing today? What are you prioritizing? And where are you bringing urgency to those things that are important, bringing an empowered urgency to those things that you're saying are important but have not yet prioritized in your life, in your leadership, and in your development and organization? So until the next time I see you, have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week, and stay empowered.